Hello, welcome to the LaRouchePAC Weekly Report for March the 14th, 2012. I'm John Hoefle, and with me in the studio today are Cody Jones and Sky Shields from the basement, and Lyndon LaRouche. Good morning, Lynn.
Good morning. There's a theme which is being introduced into this process of a series of reports in which we turn our attention to the inclusion of the role of the human species and its capabilities as opposed to the levels we've been addressing things beforehand. The crucial thing which is brought into play by that reference is the fact that among all living creatures known to us, the only specimen which is capable of what is actually creativity is the human species. And that does not mean that all people express a creativity, but it is their inherent, shall we say, birthright potentiality to be creative. The problem then becomes the fact that the term creativity is used as a nonsense word in its popular use. Very few people are willfully creative. This is a result of the influence of the oligarchical principle in the history of mankind, that people who are supposed to obey, shall we say, are not allowed to be creative, are not encouraged to do so. They're encouraged to adopt instructions which have been given to them or habits which are passed on to them, and they are the unwitting victims often of this kind of process. Creativity is limited to a number of notions in human vocabulary. That one is in the case of vicarious hypothesis, in the case of Kepler. Metaphor is another term for that. So creativity is not limited to physical science as such. It also includes the concept of metaphor, which is, as the case of Kepler demonstrates, is equivalent to this human creativity. And therefore, but what this does, it changes our focal point of reference up to the point we're dealing only with living processes other than mankind. There is no creative factor of action in the living species. Creativity is a specifically, as far as we know, specifically human quality, as restricted to the human being. And this reverses the way we think about mankind and about all species. Up to that point, the tendency is, before you get to human creativity, the assumption is that everything is determined from past to future, past to present to future. When you enter the human activity, you discover a quality in the universe, which is a dominant quality in the universe, which changes that order. We continue to appear to behave based on a sequence of cause-effect processes. When you get to this point, you get a change. Not only is mankind creative, that is, that by creativity we mean that a discovery which has occurred before the fact has been discovered. The discovery of a principle which has been discovered before the action of that principle has been recorded. So this, in other words, when we talk about mankind, most people in society today have no understanding of this distinction. And this means so-called well-educated people as well as others. Very few people are aware of the significance of this distinction. The effect is this. When we think about true creativity, as it occurs as a phenomenon in mankind and consequently the universe, the future is determining the present. That's the distinction. Now this takes the form of mankind changes his thoughts, or the universe itself changes its intention, just as mankind does. And therefore the future is now shaping your action and knowledge of the present. And that's the difference. Creativity means, generally in mankind's behavior, ideas which are generated in the human mind which precede the discovery of principles which lead to a change. What we find now that when we look at the animal part of the system and non-living systems, we now can just shift from the assumption that everything is from past to future, from past and present to future. We now say, yes, but the change in the universe, creativity always comes before the sensed action. That's particularly in human behavior. That's also the general behavior of the universe. So now we simply shift, we preserve everything we have studied in terms of physical science, living processes, without mankind. When you introduce the role of mankind, you're also introducing the notion of what is called a creator. There's a creative process which changes the universe in anticipation of ordinary sense perception's discovery of it. And that becomes the driving force which reveals to us exactly how the universe works. This becomes extremely significant with the examples of thermonuclear fusion as an application. For example, thermonuclear fusion as a driving force to get from Moon to Mars in 1 week. Therefore, you see the creative process, which is anticipated by Einstein in terms of his conception of matter, antimatter. Then you get to the actual concept of the antimatter matter process, and you get to the same thing in a higher form of order. So now when we in mankind begin to think about acting on the basis of getting to Mars in 1 week by thermonuclear fusion, or getting to the edge of our solar system by matter-antimatter reactions as a human possibility now, one we can develop. We are now looking at the way the future in the universe actually operates. When we go from ordinary sense perception into more advanced forms, like the fusion form, matter-antimatter form, and human life, then we find the agreement between the human mentality and the future. All other species are incapable of doing that, except as mankind intervenes to cause them to do that. So now we have entered, just from what we've been doing in the previous weeks, we now have this, everything we had before now. We are now adding a factor, the factor of specifically human creativity, which is rarely known and practiced among human beings. Only a few human beings have ever understood this. The Einstein case of the E equal mc squared is an example of this. When you introduce thermonuclear fusion as a way of measuring time, now you understand Einstein and you understand mankind. So this is the break we're making, continuing exactly everything we've been looking at before from this whole process of discussion. We're now adding one factor, and that one factor changes everything without eliminating anything we've learned up to this time.